Agatha Raisin and the Fatal Fragrances. Good evening, dear friends, and welcome back to the Detective Notebook. Tonight, we once again slip into the charming but never peaceful village of Carsley, tucked deep in the rolling Cotswolds. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? I love seeing how far our little mystery community reaches. Before we begin, feel free to tap the like button and subscribe, only if this kind of cozy chaos is your cup of tea. It truly helps the channel grow and keeps these mysteries coming your way. Now, settle in, dim the lights, and grab a cup of tea, because tonight again we are going to steps into Agatha's world.
Chapter 1. Sense, Spite, and a Polished Smile. Agatha Raisin woke to the smell of coffee strong enough to remove varnish, and the sound of two cats expressing disappointment. Hodge sat by the empty bowl with the air of a betrayed spouse. Boswell lay beside him, tail flicking, eyes narrowed, radiating judgment. Agatha, still in her dressing gown, glared back. "Yes, yes, I'm coming," she said, as if she had kept them waiting for hours instead of 6 seconds. "Honestly, you'd think I'd forgotten your birthdays." She poured the coffee, black and uncompromising, and slid bread into the toaster. When it popped up, she buttered it lightly, then scraped most of it off because one had to maintain standards, even if no one else did. The cats were fed, sniffed, and clearly found the offering barely adequate. Boswell tasted one biscuit, then looked up at her as if she had personally insulted his ancestry. Agatha carried her coffee to the small kitchen table and picked up the Post. Bills, a parish newsletter, and a glossy flyer printed on paper thick enough to suggest confidence. "Fatal Fragrances," it announced in elegant lettering. "Grand opening today. Reinvent yourself. Proprietor, Celeste March." Agatha snorted. "Reinvent yourself," she said aloud. "I've reinvented myself more times than that font has serifs." Still, she read the flyer twice. The photograph showed a woman with dark hair, immaculate skin, and the sort of smile that implied secrets and very good lighting. Agatha felt an irritating prickle behind her ribs. Celeste March. The name stirred something faint and unwelcome, like a tune you almost remembered from a party you'd hated. Agatha told herself it was nothing. Carsley attracted outsiders all the time, usually women who believed village life would appreciate their uniqueness, and then complained about the lack of decent coffee. This one just happened to be irritatingly polished. A scented sample strip fluttered from the flyer. Boswell leaned forward, sniffed, and recoiled. Hodge sneezed loudly, then glared at the strip as if it had attacked him. Agatha raised an eyebrow. "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said, though she moved the paper away. The scent was floral, yes, but sharp, almost metallic underneath, like roses arguing with bleach. Outside, Carsley was already awake. Through the window, Agatha could see bunting being strung for the weekend, and Mrs. Withers fussing over a hanging basket with unnecessary aggression. The air drifting in through the cracked window smelled wrong. Too sweet, too deliberate, as if someone had tried to improve nature and overdone it. Agatha glanced at herself in the hall mirror. The dressing gown made her look authoritative rather than frumpy, she decided. She smoothed her hair anyway. One never knew who might see one popping out for milk. Or perfume, apparently. "I am not interested," she told her reflection firmly. "I am merely observant." The reflection looked unconvinced. So did the cats. Still, she tucked the flyer into her handbag, purely in case someone needed warning, or interrogation, or both. She slipped on sensible shoes, which annoyed her slightly, and grabbed her coat. Hodge followed her to the door, Boswell close behind, both clearly relieved she was leaving the offending scent behind. As Agatha stepped outside, the floral note thickened, hanging over the lane like an announcement. She paused, nostrils flaring, a small, unwelcome thrill beneath her irritation. Something new had arrived in Carsley, and Agatha Raisin had a feeling it was going to be trouble. She set off toward the village, following her nose. She told herself she was bored, not threatened. Curious, not jealous, but the distinction felt thin as mist. Somewhere ahead, a shop door would open, smiles would be exchanged, and Agatha suspected she would not enjoy any of it at all. That alone felt suspicious indeed. Fatal Fragrances announced itself to Carsley with a tinkling bell and an aggressive bouquet that hit Agatha full in the face the moment she crossed the threshold. She paused, nostrils flaring. Jasmine, certainly. Something citrusy pretending to be innocent. And underneath it all, an assertive note that felt less like perfume and more like a challenge. The boutique was packed. Villagers hovered in clusters, murmuring appreciatively, as if they were at a gallery opening rather than a shop where one might reasonably expect to purchase something without emotional commitment. Glass shelves gleamed. Bottles sat like jewels under spotlights. Everyone looked faintly overdressed for a Tuesday morning. Agatha adjusted her scarf, purely reflexive, and reminded herself she had excellent posture. At the center of it all stood Celeste March. Celeste was tall in a way that suggested careful planning. Her hair fell in a glossy sheet that probably never frizzed in damp weather. She wore cream trousers, a silk blouse, and an expression of effortless welcome that made Agatha's molars ache. Celeste laughed easily, touching arms lightly, dispensing compliments like currency. "Welcome, everyone," Celeste said, her voice low and warm. "Please try everything. Scent should be an experience, not a commitment." Agatha snorted quietly. She watched as half the women leaned in, wrists extended, eyes shining. Several men hovered behind them, suddenly interested in notes of bergamot and vetiver. Mrs. Bloxby dabbed a sample onto a card and sniffed. Almost immediately she coughed, politely, apologetically, as though it were her own fault. "Oh dear, that's quite something." A counselor at the far end sniffed another strip and promptly dissolved into tears. "It reminds me of my first divorce," she said, wiping her eyes. "Powerful stuff," Agatha muttered. Celeste drifted toward her, movements smooth as poured honey. "And you must be Agatha Raisin," she said, eyes flicking over Agatha with unsettling accuracy. "I've heard so much." "Have you?" Agatha said. "I'm surprised. I don't talk to strangers." Celeste smiled. "I adore your look. So pared back. Natural austerity really suits you." There it was, perfectly phrased, a compliment that landed like a slap. Agatha smiled thinly. "I find it helps keep expectations low." They held each other's gaze for a beat too long. Something electric passed between them. Not attraction, exactly. Recognition. Samples continued to circulate. One woman sniffed and declared it divine. Another sneezed violently and demanded water. A third stormed out, red-faced, hissing that Celeste had stolen everything and would hear from her solicitor. Whispers followed her out. "Copied formulas," someone murmured near the display of atomizers. "Unpaid debts," said another, leaning in conspiratorially. Agatha pretended to examine a bottle, listening carefully. The label was elegant, the name unfamiliar, and yet it tugged at something in her memory. Celeste March. Where had she heard it? Celeste met her eye again from across the room. This time her smile didn't quite reach it. The event wound down eventually, villagers drifting away, clutching sample cards and opinions. Agatha lingered outside, watching as Celeste locked up, her silhouette framed by warm light. As Agatha turned toward home, a faint trail of perfume followed her down the lane, lingering, insistent. Later that night, from her bedroom window, Agatha noticed the boutique lights still burning, and for reasons she couldn't quite explain, the scent on the air made her uneasy.
Chapter 2. A Body in Bloom. Agatha woke to the sound of claws on wicker and a low, sustained yowl that suggested either imminent starvation or the collapse of civilization. She opened one eye. Gray light pressed against the curtains. Too early. Entirely unnecessary. All right, she muttered. "I'm coming. You'd think I'd been gone for weeks." Hodge sat by the bedroom door, broad and immovable, his expression one of profound disappointment. Boswell paced, tail twitching irritably, as if timing her incompetence. Agatha swung her legs out of bed, noticing immediately that something felt off. The air was heavy, sweet, unnaturally so. Downstairs, as she filled the kettle, the cats wound around her ankles with unusual urgency. Normally, breakfast was a stately affair, involving complaints and negotiation. Today, it was a siege. "You're getting fed," Agatha said. Honestly, the drama. She scooped food into their bowls. Both cats leaned in, sniffed, and recoiled. Boswell backed away as if personally insulted. Hodge sat down heavily and stared at her, unblinking. "Oh, don't be ridiculous," Agatha said. She sniffed the air again. That same floral note, stronger now. What is it? Neither cat moved toward the bowls. Then the sirens began. They sliced through the birdsong, sharp and insistent, and Agatha froze with the kettle in her hand. Carsley did not do sirens. Carsley did church bells, tractors, and the occasional overly enthusiastic hedge trimmer. "Well," she said, heart thumping despite herself, "that's new." She crossed to the window and peered out. Down the lane, a police car idled near the square. Villagers gathered in dressing gowns and cardigans, faces alight with restrained excitement. Behind her, Boswell sneezed violently. Agatha set the kettle down and opened the kitchen window. Cold morning air rushed in, scattering the scent. Immediately, both cats returned to their bowls and began eating with exaggerated enthusiasm, as if to make a point. Fine, blame me. By the time Agatha reached the square, the story was already circulating, thickened with speculation. Celeste March had been found in her shop, dead. Slipped, apparently. Glass everywhere. Terribly tragic. "She must have fallen," someone said solemnly. "Those floors are polished." "Roses everywhere," said another, "crushed right into the tiles." Agatha edged closer. Through the boutique window, she could see it. Shattered bottles glinting like ice, dark liquid pooling and staining the pale floor. A scatter of red petals lay trampled near the counter, as if beauty itself had been roughly handled. A policeman spoke quietly to Mrs. Bloxby, who nodded, lips pressed together. "Accident," the officer said to no one in particular. "Unfortunate combination of heels and glass." Agatha leaned in, inhaling carefully. The smell was overwhelming, but wrong. Too sharp, too metallic beneath the flowers. She frowned. At the edge of the crowd, someone poured tea from a flask. Cups were passed around. Carsley processed trauma best with hot beverages and mild judgment. Agatha accepted a cup, eyes never leaving the shop interior. She mentally ran through the display she'd studied the day before, bottles arranged by size, color, confidence. One was missing. Her stomach tightened. Not shattered, gone. She took another careful breath. That lingering scent again. It wasn't anything she remembered from the labels. Not jasmine, not citrus. Something darker, intentional. Agatha sipped her tea, grimacing. It tasted faintly of perfume. "This will all blow over," someone said behind her. "These things happen." Agatha said nothing. She watched as the police taped off the door, sealing in the roses, the glass, and whatever truth they were content to leave there. Behind her eyes, questions bloomed insistently, and for the first time since Fatal Fragrances had opened its doors, Agatha Raisin felt quite certain that Celeste March's death was no accident at all. Agatha had always found police tape faintly insulting. It suggested that ordinary people, herself excluded, obviously, could not be trusted to look without interfering. She ducked under it anyway, offering the constable a smile that was brisk, polite, and entirely unrepentant. "I was here yesterday," she said conversationally. "I'd hate to think my taxes were being wasted on overlooking obvious details." The constable blinked. "We've got it well in hand, Mrs. Raisin, Agatha Raisin, marketing executive, retired, observant." He sighed in the manner of a man who had already decided not to enjoy his day. "It's an accident, slippery floor, glass, very sad." "Yes," Agatha said, peering past him. "Tragic how often accidents involve wiped counters." The constable followed her gaze despite himself. The main counter gleamed, conspicuously clean amid the chaos. Too clean. Everything else bore the sticky sheen of spilled perfume, but that surface shone like a dentist's conscience. "Staff must have cleaned it," he said weakly. "After death?" Agatha asked. "How thoughtful." She wandered further in, nose wrinkling. The smell was still wrong. Stronger now, with an unpleasant undertone that made her temples throb. She glanced at the till. A hairline crack ran across the casing, subtle but unmistakable.
clumsy fall, she murmured. Celeste must have hit it on the way down. Exactly, the constable said, relieved. Agatha hummed. The till drawer was slightly ajar. Around them, villagers drifted in and out under supervision, offering observations with suspicious uniformity. "So awful," said a rival shop owner, dabbing theatrically at her eyes. "She was such an inspiration." She sobbed loudly, pausing to check who was watching. Agatha raised an eyebrow. Inspiration usually didn't sound that resentful. Near the door, a counselor stood rigidly, staring at a display shelf that no longer existed. When Agatha caught her eye, the woman looked away at once, suddenly fascinated by the floor. Interesting. Agatha crouched carefully near the roses. Many were crushed beyond recognition, petals bruised and darkened. One near the counter's edge looked less trampled than placed. She picked it up, ostensibly to examine the damage, and slipped it into her coat pocket. It smelled faintly metallic beneath the floral sweetness. "Mrs. Reason," said a voice gently. She turned to find Mrs. Bloxby, concern etched into her kind face. "Perhaps it's best to let the police handle this. You do have a tendency to notice things." "That's what they worry them," Agatha said. "I notice things they don't." Mrs. Bloxby smiled sadly. "Celeste made enemies very quickly." "So did I," Agatha replied. "Difference is, I survived it." As she straightened, another villager leaned in, someone she barely knew, all soft voice and sympathetic eyes. "You should be careful. This sort of thing can turn unpleasant." Agatha smiled back. "It already has." She ducked back under the tape and stepped into the fresh air, breathing deeply despite the lingering scent that clung to her clothes. Her head ached now, a dull pressure behind her eyes. Accident, they said, nothing to see. She walked home slowly, irritation simmering beneath her calm. Someone had wiped away evidence. Someone had taken Celeste's phone. Someone wanted this to end neatly. Agatha unlocked her door, already rearranging possibilities in her mind. If Celeste March had inspired jealousy, and she clearly had, then Agatha knew exactly where to start looking, and she very much doubted she'd like what she found.
Chapter 3. Rivals in Bloom. Mrs. Bloxby's sitting room smelled reassuringly of Earl Grey, furniture polish, and moral superiority. Agatha sank into the sofa with a sigh that suggested the cushions were inadequate, but acceptable under the circumstances. "I don't know how you sit on this every day," Agatha said, accepting a teacup. "It's like perching on a well-meaning cloud." Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "I find it encourages patience." "Yes," Agatha replied, "that would explain a lot." Biscuits appeared. Agatha selected one, inspected it, and bit cautiously. "Dry," she announced, "but honest. I respect that in a biscuit." Mrs. Bloxby folded her hands. "Everyone's been talking about Celeste," she said softly. "Such a shock." "Shock is relative," Agatha said. "Some people looked more relieved than surprised." Mrs. Bloxby hesitated, then nodded. "She did rather unsettle people." "In what way?" Agatha asked. "Well," Mrs. Bloxby said carefully, "some women felt diminished. She had a way of making one feel unfinished, as though one could be improved with the right purchase." Agatha snorted. "I've made a career out of that." "And some of the men," Mrs. Bloxby added, lowering her voice, "felt exposed." She asked very personal questions. "Perfume does that," Agatha said. "It's olfactory strip poker." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Bloxby arose, returning moments later with the village florist, her apron dusted with pollen and resentment. "I heard Agatha was here," the florist said briskly. "Thought I'd better speak now before everyone decides I poisoned someone with a daffodil." Agatha eyed her. "Did you?" The florist glared. "No, but Celeste undercut me. Offered signature scents for weddings, as if flowers weren't personal enough." "Did you argue?" Agatha asked lightly. "Of course I argued," the florist snapped. "She had no right." Mrs. Bloxby poured more tea. "Please," she said, "we're all friends." The florist huffed. "She didn't deserve to die," she added, "but she was careless and arrogant." Agatha nodded, filing it away. "Did you see her the night she died?" The florist hesitated. "I saw her arguing with someone, late, through the shop window." Agatha's pulse quickened. "Who?" "I couldn't see properly," the florist said, "but they knew what they were talking about. I heard words like fixative and balance, not things I say, and I talk to flowers." That landed. After the florist left, Agatha leaned back, tea cooling in her hand. "A perfume that knew perfume," she murmured, intimately. Mrs. Bloxby nodded. Celeste trusted them enough to argue privately. Agatha glanced at her reflection in the darkened window. Hair slightly flat, lipstick holding its ground. She felt a familiar, uncomfortable twist. Professional envy. She knew it well. "I didn't like her," Agatha admitted, "but I didn't want her dead." "No," Mrs. Bloxby said gently. "You wanted to outshine her." Agatha grimaced. Details. She stood, reaching for her coat. "Thank you for the tea and the biscuits. I'll recover." As she stepped outside, the village seemed deceptively calm. Gardens bloomed, birds sang. Somewhere someone had known enough about perfume to turn it lethal, and Agatha Raisin intended to find out exactly who that was.
The lab supply shop sat just off the high street, tucked between a pet groomer and a newsagent that still sold magazines featuring celebrities nobody recognized anymore. Agatha had passed it 100 times without interest. Today, it felt like destiny in beige paint. Inside, the air smelled reassuringly of disinfectant and dust. Shelves were lined with bottles bearing labels that promised danger only to the uninformed. A bell chimed softly as Agatha entered. A man looked up from behind the counter. Mid-50s, tidy beard, cardigan that had once been fashionable and was now merely loyal. His eyes brightened. "Good morning," he said. "How can I help?" Agatha smiled. Warm, approachable, and calibrated to extract information. "I'm hoping you can," she said. "I've developed a sudden interest in chemistry. It's terribly inconvenient," he chuckled. "Happens to the best of us." "I doubt that," said Agatha. "But do carry on." She wandered the aisles as he followed, explaining things with enthusiasm. Essential oils, fixatives, allergens, volatility. Agatha nodded, absorbing far more than she let on. "Most perfume ingredients are perfectly harmless," he said, "unless combined improperly. Some oils amplify others. Some linger longer than intended. Like men, harmless individually, catastrophic in groups." He laughed, clearly delighted. "Exactly. Take this fixative, for instance." He gestured to a locked cabinet. "Rare. Stabilizes scent. Makes it cling." Agatha's pulse ticked up. "Funny you should mention that. A woman in the village, Celeste March, was asking about fixatives recently." His smile faded slightly. "Yes, last week. Did she buy any?" He hesitated. "She ordered one. Very specific. Would you mind showing me the receipt?" Agatha asked, lightly, as though asking to borrow a pen. He rummaged beneath the counter and produced a slip of paper. Agatha took it, scanning quickly. The signature at the bottom was neat, but too rounded, too eager. "That's not her handwriting." He frowned. "You knew her?" "I met her, and she didn't sign like a schoolgirl practicing for marriage." He leaned closer. "Now that you mention it, she didn't collect it herself. Someone else did. Said they were authorized." Agatha handed the receipt back. "Did you check?" "Well," he said, embarrassed, "they knew exactly what they were asking for." "Of course they did," Agatha murmured. She drifted toward the door, then paused. "Out of curiosity, purely academic, what happens if that fixative is mixed with the wrong oil?" He winced. "Skin reactions, breathing issues. In rare cases worse, especially if exposure is prolonged." "Lingering," Agatha said. "Yes," he agreed. "Very lingering." She thanked him, complimented his cardigan, truthfully, as it reminded him of a man she once liked, and stepped back into the street. The village felt different now, sharper, as if the air itself were hiding something. Someone had known enough about perfume to weaponize it. Someone had forged Celeste's signature. Someone wanted a scent to mislead, to mask intention beneath beauty. Agatha glanced toward Fatal Fragrances at the far end of the street. Its windows were dark now, innocent as closed eyes. She felt a familiar thrill, annoyance braided with anticipation. Well, she said to herself, time to have another look. And this time, she intended to smell everything.
Chapter 4. False Notes. Agatha let herself into Fatal Fragrances using a method she privately referred to as administrative confidence. She had not, strictly speaking, been given permission, but she had been told by a junior constable that no one would be back until morning, which Agatha chose to interpret as a standing invitation. The shop was dim, lit only by the street lamp outside and the faint glow of emergency lighting. Without the daytime bustle, the place felt theatrical, too quiet, too deliberate. The scent hung heavier now, clinging to the air like an accusation. Agatha wrinkled her nose. Honestly, she muttered, even dead you're trying too hard. She moved slowly, heels clicking softly on the polished floor. Shattered glass had been swept aside, but faint sticky patches remained, tugging at the soles of her shoes. She imagined Celeste gliding across this floor, confident, adored, irritatingly perfect. Jealousy pricked her, sharp and unwelcome. Get a grip, Agatha whispered to herself. You've outlasted worse haircuts than her. She circled the counter, eyes sharp. The wiped surface gleamed again. Someone had cleaned it thoroughly, too thoroughly. Agatha bent, peering beneath, and noticed a slight irregularity in the woodwork. A panel. She pressed gently. It slid open. Of course, said Agatha. Every woman has secrets. Hers just come with index cards. Inside the hidden drawer were neat files, each labeled with a customer's name. Agatha pulled one free and read, anxious about aging, needs reassurance, responds well to compliments about elegance. Agatha snorted, joined the club. Another card, feels invisible, overcompensates, craves attention. Agatha grimaced. That's just cruel. Celeste hadn't sold perfume. She'd sold vulnerability, bottled, branded, and priced accordingly. Agatha felt a flicker of admiration, immediately followed by irritation. Still, she said aloud, you didn't deserve to be murdered for it. She slid the files back and closed the drawer, turning towards the display shelves. As she did, something caught her eye near the skirting board. A folded piece of paper, tucked carelessly where it might be found, or planted. Agatha picked it up. The note was short, angry, slanted handwriting, heavy pressure. You stole everything from me. This ends now. Agatha read it twice, then sniffed it. Lavender. She rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. The florist's shop reeked of lavender year-round. Everyone knew that. This was too neat, too obvious. Murder notes were rarely considerate enough to announce themselves so obligingly. Still, it would do its job nicely. Point fingers, close cases. Agatha folded the note back into place. Let the police find it. Let them be distracted. She straightened, head throbbing faintly again as the scent pressed in. Somewhere nearby, a floorboard creaked. Agatha froze. Hello? She called lightly. If you're planning to murder me, do get on with it. I hate suspense. Silence. She waited a beat longer, then shook her head. Nerves, or imagination sharpened by too much perfume and not enough dinner. As she moved toward the door, she glanced back once more at the shop. Bottles gleamed innocently. Roses, now removed, left ghostly marks on the floor. Someone had wanted Celeste silenced. Someone had wanted blame redirected. Agatha slipped outside, locking up behind her as neatly as if she owned the place. A suspect would emerge soon enough. Someone always did. And Agatha had the uncomfortable feeling that when they did, the truth would smell nothing like lavender at all. The next morning, Carsley's Square buzzed with polite curiosity. Agatha arrived at the florist's shop, her cat's approval from home replaced by the village's watchful eyes. She entered, noting immediately that the scent of lilies was unusually strong, almost theatrical. The florist, cheeks flushed and hands trembling, avoided her gaze. I have to confess, she stammered, voice cracking. "It was me. I didn't mean to—" "Slow down," Agatha said, raising a finger. "First, breathe. Then tell me exactly what happened." The florist sobbed openly, collapsing into a chair. Agatha crouched beside her, hiding a smirk behind her hand. Drama, after all, was comforting when handled theatrically. I went to the shop last night. I wanted to scare Celeste. Just a warning, nothing more. I didn't know she— Agatha's brow furrowed. She sniffed the air, carefully, discreetly. Yes, lilies. But beneath them, a sharp metallic tang, faint but undeniable. Not hers. Something deliberate. Someone else had been here. Someone who understood scent as well as she did. Agatha said softly. And the note? The florist admitted, tears falling into her hands. But I didn't write it. Her words dissolved into sobs. Agatha's eyes narrowed. Details didn't add up. A forged note, a missing bottle, a scent mismatched to her fingerprints. Too many small things defied her sense of order. The police officer assigned to the case lingered nearby, nodding politely. Well, there you have it. Problem solved. Agatha exhaled slowly, her lips pressed into a thin line. She knew why they wanted a neat ending. Celeste had unsettled the village. Her death needed closure, preferably painless, preferably tidy, preferably someone to blame that didn't involve digging too deeply into anyone else's affairs. But tidy endings rarely smelled like the truth. "You know," Agatha said, her voice mild but firm, "confession is a delicate thing. One must be careful what one admits. Facts matter." The florist looked up, confusion and grief mingled in her eyes. Agatha allowed herself a small wry smile, a teacher of sorts, without the chalk dust and condescension. "You see," Agatha continued, "if someone else orchestrated events, someone who understands how to mask intent, then your, admission is, shall we say, incomplete." The officer blinked. "Are you suggesting this isn't sufficient?" Agatha shrugged, elegant and infuriatingly calm. "Merely that truth has a way of lingering in ways the police rarely appreciate, and scent is nothing if not persistent." She stood, brushing her skirt lightly, letting the air of authority settle. "I suggest a thorough review. Even a small piece of evidence can change a narrative." The florist nodded numbly, cheeks still damp. Agatha noted the way she trembled, not just with guilt, but fear. Of what, she wasn't certain. Fear of discovery? Fear of consequences? Or fear of the neat story unraveling? Agatha left the shop, her heels clicking against the cobblestones. She inhaled deeply. The scent of flowers still clung to the air, but the metallic undertone remained faint, as if mocking her. Neat endings were for those content to ignore inconvenient truths. Agatha Raisin was not among them. She adjusted her coat and scarf. There was work to do, motives to reassess, lies to untangle, and someone out there, still clever enough to hope the world would take a confession at face value, was about to discover she wasn't fooled.
Chapter 5. Jealousy Distilled. Agatha's cottage smelled of warm tea, polished wood, and faintly of Hodge and Boswell's morning breakfast. She perched in front of the mirror, holding a small comb like a wand and glaring at the reflection it presented. The hair was straighter than yesterday, though not by much. The lipstick, an audacious red that might have been called determined, stayed put. Her reflection, however, remained unconvinced. Hodge lay sprawled across her favorite armchair, tail flicking in judgment. Boswell sat primly on the windowsill, ears angled like tiny radar dishes. "You're both very critical this morning," Agatha said. "I expect more sympathy." They ignored her. She sighed. It was easier to take criticism from cats than people, though she suspected the cats might be plotting subtle revenge for the lack of fresh cream. Her thoughts drifted. James Lacey. She hadn't meant to think of him. She hadn't meant to miss him. And yet there it was, the pang of memory, sharp and unwelcome, like a thorn in the otherwise neat bouquet of her mind. Jealousy. She admitted it aloud. "Yes, that's why I'm so invested," she muttered. Curiosity sniffing around, envy disguised as investigation. Boswell yawned. Hodge blinked once. Agatha ignored the silent judgment. She returned to Celeste March's boutique notes spread across the table, customer profiles neatly catalogued, each revealing insecurities and desires. One, however, stood out. Name, Eleanor Whitford. Notes, imitator, tries to copy, overcompensates, feels invisible if unacknowledged. Agatha leaned closer, frowning. "Imitator," she whispered. The word felt heavy. Someone in the village had clearly been marked, analyzed, and placed in Celeste's hierarchy of annoyance or envy. She thought of the events over the last week, the subtle jeers, the polished smiles, the whispers behind hands. Someone who lived in the shadow, who saw herself erased by the brilliance of another. The killer had not only wanted to control Celeste's legacy, but perhaps to reclaim a space she felt denied. Agatha combed her fingers through her hair, her own reflection now less a friend and more an accomplice in the realization. Age, relevance, presence, they all felt suddenly precarious. A woman who felt erased could act out in ways that were clever, petty, and, tragically, deadly. She sniffed the air, testing her own scent. Tea? Perfume? Something metallic lingering faintly from yesterday's investigations? The cats twined around her legs, grounding her, as if reminding her that she was still here, still present, still capable. "You'd better be careful, Agatha Raisin," she muttered, speaking to herself and them both. "Someone in this village doesn't feel seen. Someone wants attention, and I'm about to find her." Hodge meowed in what she interpreted as agreement. Boswell blinked in polite skepticism. She smiled faintly. At least the cats were predictable. Her thoughts sharpened. The puzzle was clearer now. The killer felt slighted. The killer wanted to assert herself. The rest, the forged receipts, the mislaid phone, the missing bottle, were just props in a carefully constructed drama. Agatha sipped her tea, its warmth grounding her. She allowed herself a small smirk. The game was becoming interesting again, even if it involved a reminder that vanity, jealousy, and pride were dangerously intertwined in her own heart. And with that, she decided it was time to confront the woman marked imitator, someone who felt invisible, someone who felt erased, and someone who was about to discover that Agatha Raisin did not ignore injustices lightly. She set down the cup, adjusted her scarf, and headed towards Carsley, Kat's silent disapproval following in her wake.
Agatha approached the councilwoman's house with a mixture of determination and mild dread. Ivy climbed the walls in neat, almost military precision, while the garden smelled faintly of rosemary and ambition. Hodge and Boswell, left at home to guard the breakfast plates, would have approved. She was ready. The door opened almost immediately. The councilwoman stood there, tall, polished, with the kind of smile that both welcomed and evaluated simultaneously. "Ah, Mrs. Raisin," she said, voice smooth as silk, yet sharp enough to trim hedges with. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Agatha inclined her head slightly. "Pleasure is relative, as always. I've come regarding Celeste March and a certain missing bottle." "Oh!" The councilwoman's eyes widened imperceptibly. "How curious of you. Do come in." Inside, the house smelled faintly of citrus polish and freshly brewed coffee, but beneath it something sharper lingered. Agatha's nose twitched. They settled into chairs in the sunroom, the councilwoman gesturing toward a sofa with the faintest hint of theatricality. Agatha sat, legs crossed, eyes scanning the surroundings. Polished surfaces, curated flowers, and strategically placed sculptures, all designed to signal taste and power. "Coffee?" the councilwoman offered, "or tea? Tea, please, strong enough to remind me I'm alive." Agatha smiled deliberately, knowing the verbal duel had begun. The councilwoman's lips twitched. "I see. Always dramatic. I rather admire it." Agatha sipped her tea, letting the warmth fill her, masking the sharp calculation in her eyes. "Admiration is risky," she said, "especially when it's given freely. One never knows what it might inspire."
They exchanged delicate paws, words as weapons, silence as armor. Celeste March, Agatha continued, voice light, had many admirers and apparently enemies. She tapped the tea saucer lightly. I wonder how much admiration turns sour. The councilwoman's eyes flicked to a cabinet, neatly arranged bottles gleaming. Agatha's pulse quickened. One bottle in particular, the one missing from Fatal Fragrances, sat prominently, label untouched. "Oh, that," the councilwoman said, voice airy. "A gift. She was quite fond of it. I thought it better in safe hands." Agatha inhaled subtly. There it was, the metallic note, sharp, insistent, lingering. "Gift," she repeated, her tone even, almost conversational. "How thoughtful. But gifts have a way of being interpreted." The councilwoman smiled tightly. "I assure you nothing untoward, purely generous." Agatha allowed herself a small chuckle. "Generous, yes, but you know what they say. The devil is in the details, or in this case, the scent." The councilwoman blinked, feigning innocence. "Scent can be deceptive." Agatha tilted her head, offering a faint, self-deprecating smile. "So can words, and intentions, and perhaps even councilwomen with impeccable taste." A ripple of laughter passed between them, sharp and brief, then vanished into civility. Each word was a chess move, each pause a strategic retreat. Agatha sipped the last of her tea, her mind cataloguing observations. The bottle, the lie, the lingering metallic undertone all pointed in the same direction. Caution, cleverness, and a need for appearances wrapped in a polished exterior. She rose gracefully, inclining her head. "Thank you for your time, and the coffee, delicious, very civilized." The councilwoman's smile held, though Agatha noted the subtle tightness around the eyes. Outside, Carsley's air felt fresher. The village seemed calm, almost deceivingly so. But Agatha knew better. A gift or a weapon. That metallic note would not be ignored. She straightened her coat and tightened her scarf. Time for proof. Time to see how carefully polished surfaces concealed sharp edges. Time to unravel intentions hidden behind courtesy, compliments, and citrus polish.
Chapter 6. The Lingering Truth. Agatha arrived at the lab supply shop with purpose, though she made it look casual. Hands tucked into her coat pockets, scarf arranged just so, and an expression that said, "I am here for tea, really, but also everything else." The bell above the door jingled as she entered, a cheerful contrast to the urgency thrumming in her chest. The chemist looked up, eyes lighting with recognition. "Back so soon?" he asked, smiling. "Curiosity is a persistent companion." "Indeed," Agatha replied, tilting her head, "and sometimes it smells faintly of danger." He raised an eyebrow, amused, as she wandered toward the shelves. "I take it your investigation is olfactorily motivated." Agatha chuckled, fingering a vial. "Lab etiquette dictates I examine before I accuse. Also, it's polite to sniff." They moved to a counter cluttered with glassware, chemicals, and an assortment of pipettes. Agatha leaned in as he carefully demonstrated, keeping her eyes bright and her mind sharper. "So," she said, "the rare fixative Celeste requested last week, combined with, say, a common essential oil?" "Ah," he said, his voice low and measured, "dangerous. It can trigger severe reactions. Allergic, yes, but also systemic if exposure is sufficient. Timing matters." Agatha nodded slowly, absorbing the details. "Sufficient exposure, like prolonged contact?" "Exactly. And if done cleverly," he added, lowering his voice, "it can appear accidental. Floors polished, glass shattered, death delayed, staged as a mishap." Agatha raised an eyebrow. "So someone could administer it and the victim would seem unlucky rather than targeted?" "Precisely," the chemist replied. "It requires knowledge, timing, and a willingness to be subtle. Not everyone can mix ingredients so they linger without detection." Humor crept in as Agatha picked up a pipette, testing her dexterity. She dropped a tiny droplet onto the counter, which promptly sizzled. "I assume this is not standard lab protocol," she said, eyebrows arching. "Not for amateurs," the chemist said, suppressing a grin. "For seasoned investigators, perhaps."
Agatha made a mock bow, shaking her head. Goodness, yes, I wouldn't want to embarrass the establishment. Returning her focus to the matter at hand, Agatha examined the bottle that had been missing from Fatal Fragrances. The chemist explained that the fixative had been combined with a simple essential oil, olive, common, unremarkable, yet the result was lethal, small, precise, and silent. "And the bottle?" Agatha prompted. "It contained the mixture," he said quietly. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Celeste could have handled small doses safely, but this, intended duration, staggered, deliberate, designed to mimic accident. Agatha inhaled sharply. It all fit. The bottle, the fixative, the metallic undertone, the staged accident. All that remained was to identify the hand that poured, the mind that plotted, the person who wielded perfume as both gift and weapon. Her lips pressed into a determined line. Time, she said to herself, to set a trap. Cardsley might still appear quaint and serene, but Agatha Raisin was already 3 steps ahead, armed with chemistry, cunning, and the faintest lingering scent of justice.
The Fox and Hound smelled of toasted bread, bitter ale, and something faintly medicinal from the lingering presence of village coughs. Agatha had reserved a quiet corner, ostensibly for tea and reflection, but the room hummed with anticipation as a small group gathered. Villagers whispered behind hands, suspicious of her motives, curious despite themselves. She placed a small tray of perfumes on the table. "A memorial sniff," she announced, her tone casual yet perfectly pitched, "for Celeste March, a moment to remember her, olfactorily." A ripple of polite murmurs followed. People leaned in, peering at the vials, unsure whether to take offence or admiration. Agatha selected one vial, giving a demonstrative sniff and pretending to shiver. "Exquisite," she said, though faintly alarming. She watched them carefully, noting reactions. The usual suspects wrinkled noses at lavender and citrus, murmuring polite words of condolence. But then she observed the councilwoman, sitting with a pristine cup of tea balanced delicately in her hand. Her eyes flicked ever so slightly at the vial in Agatha's fingers. Recognition, subtle, fast, precise. Agatha's pulse ticked faster. "Do be careful," she said lightly. "Some scents linger longer than intended." The councilwoman smiled, a practised curl of lips, but her hand trembled. She leaned forward, inhaling. A slight cough, a quick glance around, then away. "Familiar, perhaps?" Agatha asked, voice low and deliberate. "One might say this mixture has history." The councilwoman's eyes widened imperceptibly. She set the cup down with slightly more force than necessary, hands pressing against the edge of the table. "Quite remarkable," Agatha said, offering a tight smile. "A fixative blended with olive, innocuous to the casual nose, but potentially memorable if one knew what to expect." The room remained silent, tension rising like the head on a freshly poured pint. Villagers exchanged glances, uncertain whether this was theatrical or investigative. The councilwoman shifted uncomfortably. I don't know what you mean," she said quickly, voice tight. Agatha tilted her head. "Oh, come now. One does not faintly recognize a scent without prior experience. You've smelled this before, at home, perhaps, in a setting intended to remain discreet." Heat crept into the councilwoman's cheeks. Her fingers fumbled against her handbag. I... The pause was damning. She was panicking. Her carefully constructed composure cracked. She glanced toward the door, as if considering escape, but her pride anchored her. Agatha allowed herself a faint, victorious smile. "Yes, fascinating, isn't it? The way subtle blends can reveal much more than intended. Timing, exposure, intent, all exposed in a sniff." A cough from the corner drew the room's attention, but Agatha ignored it. Her eyes stayed locked on the councilwoman. The truth was near, tangible, lingering like the metallic note she had traced all week. The councilwoman's lips pressed into a thin line, hands still shaking, eyes darting. Will she confess, Agatha thought, or flee, hoping the villagers' gossip would carry the blame elsewhere? The scent test had worked. Observing reaction was more telling than any direct accusation. The village, in its polite chaos, was a theatre, and she, for once, controlled the spotlight. Agatha sipped her tea, masking satisfaction behind a mask of calm. The councilwoman's discomfort spoke louder than words ever could. She knew that the final confrontation was imminent. The pieces were converging, motive, method, and opportunity, and in a quiet, very British way, Agatha Raisin was ready to see the truth revealed, one carefully orchestrated sniff at a time.
Chapter 7. The Killer Revealed. The village hall was packed. Chairs creaked under the weight of curious neighbors, the murmur of polite speculation buzzing like distant bees. Agatha stood near the front, her coat neatly pressed, scarf arranged just so, and eyes sharp. She had rehearsed her speech, not the words exactly, but the rhythm of revelation. The councilwoman entered, greeting acquaintances with a practiced smile. Agatha's pulse ticked faster. Every step the woman took, every flutter of hands over handbags, betrayed her composure. Beneath the polite exterior, Agatha could smell it, the faint metallic trace, barely perceptible yet unmistakable. "May I have your attention?" Agatha's voice carried naturally over the low chatter. Silence began to fall. "I have a matter of urgency concerning Celeste March, her death, and the unfortunate events that led us here." Polite murmurs rose again. Some leaned forward, genuinely curious. Others prepared to scoff. Agatha ignored them all, focusing on the woman who had underestimated her. Celeste March was talented, admired, envied, and, some might say, stolen from. She let the words hang, watching carefully as the councilwoman shifted slightly. "Yes," Agatha said, drawing a small breath. "Someone here took more than inspiration. They stole Celeste's attention, her identity in subtle ways, and even her scent. And when Celeste refused to yield, that jealousy festered." Gasps rustled through the hall. Eyes flicked toward the councilwoman, who raised her chin with deliberate defiance. Agatha smiled faintly, the expression gentle but precise. "Now, this person," she produced the missing bottle from her coat, "did not intend murder. They intended humiliation, exposure, embarrassment, retribution. But the method they chose was lethal. The mixture in this bottle, combined with a common essential oil, delayed reaction. It was clever, calculated, and tragically effective." The councilwoman's face paled. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. Her hands trembled slightly. Agatha stepped closer, projecting calm authority. "Jealousy is a powerful motivator. It can make us petty, vindictive, irrational, but it does not absolve consequences. The combination of intent, knowledge, and opportunity points to you." A long pause. The councilwoman's voice finally broke the silence. I didn't mean, I just—" "You meant what?" Agatha prompted softly, voice steady. "To teach Celeste March a lesson, yes, but this lesson became irreversible, and now the law must step in." From the back, the constable approached, hand on his radio. Agatha handed over the bottle. The metallic note lingered faintly in the air, proof more compelling than words alone. "Step forward," the officer said. "You are under arrest." The hall went silent. The councilwoman's eyes flicked around, disbelief mingling with shame. Some villagers whispered, others gasped openly. Agatha remained calm, letting the moment breathe, letting the truth settle into the room like a quiet fog. I never meant, I only wanted to be seen," the councilwoman stammered. Tears formed, though she tried to blink them away. "We all want to be seen. Some of us act on it poorly, but intent does not erase consequence. Your actions, jealousy, pride, and careful planning led to tragedy." The officer gently guided the councilwoman toward the door. The murmurs swelled into hushed speculation, punctuated with the occasional sniff of lingering perfume. Agatha straightened, exhaling. Her role as observer, detective, and occasional moral compass was done. Carsley had held its breath, and now it could exhale. She glanced toward the windows of Fatal Fragrances, imagining Celeste March smiling faintly at the resolution. A sense of calm washed over her. Justice, tempered with empathy, had been served. The villagers returned to their routines, conversations humbler, faces softer. Agatha, meanwhile, allowed herself a small, self-satisfied smile. Her work was never done, but at least today she had ensured that the truth lingered longer than the scent of deception.
The village of Carsley exhaled. Sirens faded, footsteps softened, and the hum of gossip returned to a gentle murmur. Agatha strolled down the high street, hands in her coat pockets, observing neighbors cautiously resuming normal routines. Shopkeepers straightening wares, children squealing near the fountain, dogs sniffing with renewed purpose. She passed the pub, where a few villagers lingered over pints, discussing the events in hushed, incredulous tones. "Well, I never thought the councilwoman," one muttered. "Who'd have guessed?" Agatha allowed herself a faint smile, but refused the urge to comment. Her work was done, not to earn praise, but to ensure the village retained its illusion of safety. Recognition, she decided, could wait for someone less stubborn, or less clever. The morning sunlight, filtered through soft clouds, glinted off the shop windows, including Fatal Fragrances. Inside, the boutique was quiet, bottles gleaming under artificial light, now dark and somber as the blinds closed. Agatha imagined Celeste's meticulous arrangement, now untouched, waiting for a day that would not come. A soft chuckle escaped her. She pictured the two cats at home, judging the world with their usual scorn, and felt a pang of relief. At least someone remained unbothered by human folly. Hodge and Boswell would have been scandalized by the amount of perfume floating in the air, she thought, and would certainly have demanded a fresh bowl of cream to cleanse their delicate palates. Agatha imagined Boswell's disdainful stare and Hodge's flicking tail, and the tension that had clung to her all week lifted just slightly. Passing Mrs. Bloxby's garden, she caught sight of carefully pruned roses, nodding to herself. Life, as always, persisted. Villagers, scandal-prone but resilient, would rebuild routines. Gossip would soften, complaints would resume, and for now, the village would remember the excitement fondly, like a faintly unpleasant yet stimulating perfume. "Never underestimate the calming power of domestic life," she murmured to herself, "and cats." A gentle breeze carried hints of lavender, rosemary, and something metallic lingering faintly in corners, reminders that actions leave traces, no matter how careful one tries to be. Agatha inhaled deeply, appreciating both the relief and the subtle warning. Life had returned to its gentle rhythm, but the world would always carry faint echoes of past disruption. She paused near the boutique's shuttered door, reflecting on the week. Tension, deception, and human frailty had collided spectacularly. Yet in the aftermath, humor and warmth returned. A shop owner tripped slightly over a loose cobblestone, sparking laughter from onlookers. Agatha allowed herself a genuine chuckle, imagining Boswell mocking her in tone if he were present. Compliments from grateful villagers came unbidden, polite but excessive. Agatha declined them with a light-hearted wave. "I prefer my satisfaction quietly," she said, more to herself than anyone else, "and my reputation intact." As the day softened into afternoon, the shop remained closed, its windows dark, a quiet testament to both tragedy and resolution. The street returned to its familiar rhythm. Bicycles rattled past, hedges swayed, and the faint sense of baked goods mingled with the fading aroma of roses. Agatha adjusted her scarf, feeling the calm that follows storms, both literal and metaphorical. She exhaled, thinking of home, of her cats, and the comforting routines awaiting her. The village had survived. The truth lingered hidden in scent and memory, and Agatha Raisin, as always, would watch, observe, and occasionally intervene, ready to untangle the next quiet disaster that dared disturb the peace of Carsley. Chapter 8. A Familiar Scent. Agatha returned to her cottage with the satisfaction that comes from a job well observed, if not entirely cleanly concluded. The door clicked behind her, and she immediately set about opening windows. A fresh breeze swept through, carrying the faint scent of hedgerows, baking bread from the distant bakery, and the soft tang of dew-damp earth. Hodge and Boswell twitched their noses approvingly. Hodge leapt onto the windowsill, tail flicking with evident pleasure, while Boswell sprawled across the armchair, paws tucked neatly beneath him. "Well, I take that as consent," Agatha said, smiling. "I suppose even cats appreciate clean air after a week of complications." The familiar comfort of home settled over her. The tea kettle sang from the stove, filling the kitchen with the warm, reassuring aroma of brewing leaves. Agatha poured herself a cup, inhaling deeply. Somehow the tea tasted brighter, sweeter, more celebratory than it had in days. She allowed herself a rare, unguarded laugh. "I must look ridiculous," she murmured, swirling the tea absent-mindedly, all flustered, obsessing over perfumes, metallic traces, and missing bottles, only to end up here, with cats approving my domestic skills. Hodge yawned widely, revealing the small, sharp teeth that reminded her cats were always marginally superior, and Boswell blinked slowly, as if silently agreeing that she had indeed managed admirably. Agatha chuckled again. There was a pleasure in routine, a kind of gentle triumph in normalcy, even after chaos. She set her cup on the table, allowing herself to revel in small domestic victories. The polished wood glinting in sunlight, the faint scent of freshly laundered curtains, the soft clink of her teacup against the saucer. The world outside Carsley might have been messy and unpredictable, but inside her cottage, order reasserted itself. A soft sigh escaped her lips. Peace, she realized, had its own aroma, warm, faintly floral, and tinged with satisfaction. She poured herself a second cup of tea, thinking of the villagers, of Celeste March's boutique now closed, and the councilwoman's lessons in humility. Even the minor gossip that would inevitably swirl through the village felt harmless from the safe distance of her kitchen. Agatha perched on her favorite chair, Boswell curling against her leg, Hodge patting nearby with an air of condescension. The sun touched her cheeks with gentle warmth, the steam from her tea rising in curling ribbons that seemed to dance in rhythm with her thoughts. She allowed herself to consider the week's events without tension, letting humor and self-reflection mingle. "Perhaps," she murmured, sipping tea, "I have a knack for unraveling disasters quietly. Or maybe I'm simply stubborn. Either way, it works." She smiled, shaking her head at her own vanity, and laughed again softly, a sound that felt light, domestic, and wholly satisfying. Hodge flicked his tail, and Boswell blinked slowly, signaling approval in their usual judgmental ways. Agatha smiled at them. Their silent companionship grounded her, reminding her that for all the chaos in Carsley, her home remained a bastion of calm and gentle amusement. Just as she reached for another sip, the door's knock broke the tranquility, a sound crisp, unexpected, and faintly intriguing. Agatha set down her cup, eyes narrowing slightly, curiosity flickering like the shadows in the corners of her tidy kitchen. Something, or someone, had arrived. Peace, she realized, might be temporary, but for now she allowed herself a final satisfied glance at the open windows, the approving cats, and the clean, sunlit air. The scent of calm lingered, comforting yet charged with the promise of the next disturbance.
Agatha had just settled back into her armchair, a second cup of tea warming her hands, when the post arrived with its usual cheerful punctuality. Among the predictable bills, postcards, and a catalog of particularly horrid floral patterns, one envelope stood out. Cream, heavy, and sealed with wax stamped in an intricate swirl. Her name was written in a script that suggested leisure, confidence, and a hint of mischief. She held it up, squinting through the sunlight streaming across the polished floor. Hodge twitched his tail, and Boswell's ears flicked toward the subtle sound of the seal breaking. Even the cats seemed to sense the novelty, leaning forward with the kind of alert curiosity usually reserved for fish tins or sudden breezes from the garden. Agatha broke the seal carefully, as if opening a delicate glass vial. Inside was a single sheet, folded precisely, with writing that danced lightly across the page. "Dear Mrs. Raisin, your reputation precedes you. Another village, another scent. If your curiosity survives the week, I hope you are ready. Her lips curved into a slow, amused smile. A challenge, a tease, an invitation wrapped in mystery. She set the letter down, inhaling softly. The faint aroma of wax and paper mingled with the comforting scent of tea and sunlight, creating a peculiar sort of anticipation in the room. Hodge sniffed the air suspiciously and let out a low, disgruntled meow. Boswell sneezed politely, a tiny hiccup that sent a ripple of laughter from Agatha. "Yes, I know," she said, laughing softly. "Even the cats are aware that adventure waits beyond our little village." She glanced out the window. Carsley rested quietly under a gentle sky, hedges swaying in the breeze, distant chimneys smoking lazily. The familiar streets seemed serene, yet now they carried the faint echo of possibilities beyond their borders. Agatha sipped her tea, savoring the warmth, allowing the day's calm to coexist with the promise of new intrigue. The letter was simple, brief, yet it carried weight. Another village, another scent to uncover, another puzzle to untangle. She allowed herself a rare moment of genuine excitement, tempered by domestic comfort. Hodge's tail flicked with impatience, and Boswell's whiskers twitched at the smallest hint of breeze, as if anticipating the unknown alongside her. Agatha set the cup down and leaned back, the afternoon sun highlighting the neat contours of her cottage. "Well," she murmured, voice low and amused, "it seems quiet days are over for now. Another mystery calls, and apparently it involves my particular talents." The cats adjusted themselves with the dignity only cats possess. Hodge yawned broadly, exposing sharp teeth, and Boswell settled on her lap, a soft purr vibrating against her hand. Agatha reached down to scratch behind Boswell's ears, letting the familiar comfort ground her as anticipation tingled at the edges of thought. Her mind already ticked over possibilities, villages, scents, jealousies, clever deception. But for now, she allowed herself the pleasure of routine, tea, cats, sunlight, and the faint thrill of challenge waiting somewhere down the road. Outside, the breeze carried a hint of lavender from the hedgerows and something entirely new, crisp and inviting. Agatha inhaled slowly, a private smile tugging at her lips. "Yes," she said, softly, more to herself than anyone else. "My nose will lead me again, and this time the world had better be ready." Hodge meowed in mild approval. Boswell sneezed again, as if punctuating her declaration. Agatha laughed, letting the sound mingle with sunlight and the gentle stir of leaves outside. The cottage was peaceful, the air was clean, but the scent of adventure, sharp, promising, irresistible, drifted faintly on the breeze. And with that, the scene faded, leaving the comfort of home intertwined with the anticipation of Agatha Raisin's next quietly chaotic investigation.